Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Joyner, founder and president of the Village Square. And on behalf of the Village Square and Florida Humanities, we're delighted you've joined us tonight for Monica Guzman, One Step Closer. This program is made possible by funding from Florida Humanities through the National Endowment for the Humanities. It's part of a multi-year series, Unum, Democracy Reignited, presented in partnership with Florida Humanities, exploring the past, present, and future of the American idea as it exists on paper, in the hearts of our people, and as it manifests in our lives. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of Florida Humanities or National Endowment for the Humanities. If you're not familiar with the work of NEH and Florida Humanities, we're putting their web addresses in chat. Be sure to check them out. The chat window will be closed tonight, but you can ask questions anytime during the program by clicking the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you haven't taken our pre-event survey yet, if you'll take just a moment to do so now, we're dropping the link in the chat thread too. Your honest and anonymous answers will help the Village Square with a major nationally scoped research effort to better understand divisions in the United States. Even if you've done the survey before, we ask that you complete it again tonight. We are delighted to welcome streaming partners, Bridge USA, USC Center for the Political Future, National Institute for Civil Discourse, Listen First Project, Common Ground Committee, Braver Angels, Civic Health Project, McCourtney Institute for Democracy, Unify, Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other podcast, Citizen Connect, Network for Responsible Public Policy, Center for the Humanities at University of Miami, and our wonderful long-term local partners, the Tallahassee Democrat and WFSU Public Media. We're also wanting to give a shout out to our newest streaming partner, Living Room Conversations, who we've worked with for many, many years, probably a decade or so. It is now my pleasure to welcome tonight's facilitator, Angela Eduardo. Angel is FIRE's senior writer and editor. FIRE defends and promotes the value of free speech for all Americans in our courtrooms, our campuses, and in our culture. He's currently chair of Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, FAIR, the board of directors. Through his work at FIRE, Angel hopes to continue promoting a culture of free speech, free inquiry, and freedom of expression through honest, good faith, and compassionate engagement with people across the political and ideological spectrum. Angel, it is great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I also just read an incredible piece that you wrote, and I'm going to ask if we can pop a few links so that people can get to know you better in the chat window. And
Sure.
I'm also going to now introduce our special guest tonight. Monica Guzman is senior fellow at Braver Angels, the nation's largest cross-partisan grassroots organization working to depolarize America, host of a Braver Way podcast, founder and CEO of Reclaim Curiosity, an organization working to build a more curious world, and co-founder of the award-winning Seattle newsletter, The Evergrey. I thought I was busy. She was a 2019 fellow at Henry M. Jackson Foundation and a 2016 fellow at the Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University. She was named one of the 50 most influential women in Seattle and served twice as a juror for the Pulitzer Prizes. A Mexican immigrant, Latina, and dual U.S.-Mexico citizen. She lives in Seattle with her husband and two kids and is the proud liberal daughter of conservative parents. Welcome, Mani.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
You two have no idea how excited I am. I can't wait to get off so I can listen to your conversation. But before I turn it over to the two of you, I wanted to give Angel a shout out for creating a rhetorical concept called star manning. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of it going on tonight. So, Angel, would you share a little tickler on what star manning is?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. To starman is to engage not only with the strongest and most charitable version of your opponent's argument, which is what would be called steel manning. It is to engage with the strongest and most charitable version of your opponent. And we do this by locating and explicitly acknowledging the fundamental human desires that are motivating their perspectives and undergirding their arguments. Basically, it's why they believe what they believe, the human story, the human values that are behind the things that they argue and advocate for and care about. And those values are values we share because we're all human beings. So even if you disagree with their argument or their position or the thing they're advocating for, you can almost certainly connect to the reason why they're advocating for it. So star manning is just a way to make that explicit because unfortunately it cannot be taken for granted. It cannot be a given these days. So we need to remind ourselves that the people on the other end of a computer screen or a telephone or even the table is a human being,
Just
just
beautiful.
like us.
So, yeah, the opposite of what
Mhm.
we see too often in our public square.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately.
thank you both, Angel and Monty. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Village Square, and everybody for having us and for being here. And Monica, thank you for hanging out with me again. Full
Yay!
disclosure, Monica and I recorded a podcast earlier today, so we've already chatted a bit and about the same topic. But that actually gets me to the thing I wanted to let you talk about, Monica, because as the host of the podcast, you didn't really get a chance to dig in the same way that your guests did. So I wanted to ask you about your feelings surrounding the election and all the emotions you've been grappling with. But I actually want to ask you not how you're feeling now, but first how you were feeling a week and a half ago, just as the election was upon us. What were you feeling and why?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to join you again, Angel, and everybody. What I was feeling on election day was
Mm,
the weight of the unknown,
hmm
and the only certainty I had was it's going to be hard from here no matter what happens. One side is going to lose. We're there's going to be victory for many, there's going to be defeat for many, there's going to be
hmm
uncertainty potentially, maybe for a long time. There might even be crisis. So for all
hmm
four of those things, it's like, okay, what's it going to be like if we do any of those things?
hmm
One of the things that really surprised me was how quickly we got the result. I think that was the
Yeah,
last thing I expected was that.
right.
Um, and then when we got the result, I was very surprised myself. And this is where I hesitate to say, because this is where my experience may depart from some folks listening. And I just need to be honest about that.
hmm
Um, I woke up to that result much less, much less scared and outraged than I was in 2016, being
mm
being a liberal and being on the blue side. I woke up to that result actually kind of expecting that result if it was going to be one or the other. So, and then I had to kind of ask myself, what's going on? Why are you
mm
not as outraged and afraid? And I'm still thinking about that one. That's an open
mm
question.
mm
Um, and then in the time since, it has been burdened, is probably the best answer I can give about how I've been feeling about everything.
hmm
Burdened.
hmm
Because that day after the election, I went and visited a couple of friends in person here in Seattle, you know, very, very blue, very, very Democrat, very progressive. And and I sat with them and I sat with a lot of fear, a lot of terror that I didn't share at the same level, but I could see. I knew exactly where it was coming from. I knew exactly the thing underneath. I knew it. Um,
hmm
and so it's been, and then came anger. Then came anger for me because I thought about, gosh, one side or the other was going to be given such a hard pill, with both sides having talked about if the other side wins, it's all over. It's all over. This may be the last election of your life. And whoever
Right.
lost, whatever side lost, was going to be left to face those fears in a much worse place. But there's been, I mean, all the money spent on getting that out, there's none left. There's none left to
hmm
support anybody.
mm
Um, and we knew one side or the other. It was going to be one or the other facing this
Yeah.
pain, and I'm angry about that. Um, not because I think all of it is real and valid, and all the arguments are all there. It's just it got so elevated. The polarization got so elevated. Can we find our way to distinguish? Can we distinguish between what's okay, let's roll up our sleeves, let's work on this, we can't let this happen, this and this and this, versus I am so afraid by these things that I imagine in the future that have not come to pass yet. It could come to pass, okay, but haven't yet. I am so afraid that I am paralyzed, and I am already, I've pushed everyone else away in my heart, everyone who isn't exactly where I am. That scares me too. And I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah, I completely hear that. My feelings about it on the eve of everything were kind of resignation of I had no idea how it was going to turn out. I really wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I felt like it could go either way. I wouldn't have been shocked, but I kind of resigned myself because we're in this space, right? The two of us do similar work where we
Yeah.
are we are masochistic in the sense that we love to throw ourselves into the fray and not join either side, and to kind of say, well, you guys should really hear each other out, and it would be better if you did, which is difficult work to do, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I kind of resign myself to the fact that regardless of how things shape up, there will be a fallout on one end or the other, and there will be an equal and opposing reaction to whatever it is that happens, right? Like there's a very strong culture war cohort for any eventuality, right? And
Yeah.
it was basically what flavor of madness am I going to be dealing with for the next four
Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
Um, Now that I mean, I had my preferences about which flavor I would want, right? But
Yeah.
but
Same.
but I knew no matter what that it was going to be a difficult time for some people, and that it was going to cause all kinds of mayhem, culture
Yeah.
mayhem or emotional mayhem, who knows? But you have you're such a great person to talk to about this stuff right now, especially because everything hits very close to home for you in particular. For those of us who've read your book, your wonderful book, I never thought of it that way, and who heard the intro, you have conservative parents. I'm assuming that they didn't vote the way you did this time
Nope.
either.
Nope. No
And
change
so,
there.
yeah, and they're Mexican immigrants, right? So that already throws a wrench into a lot of people's perceptions of things.
Right.
So what were those conversations like leading up to things, and what's the conversation like now? How does it feel? Because I know that you've taken great pains to ensure that you still have a relationship with your parents, that you guys know that there's a foundation there beyond this thing. But this
Yeah.
thing is important. It's a big deal. So tell us about how that's been and what's going on now.
Yeah. This whole election season's been really interesting. I mean, to
Mm,
contrast, especially with the last time this particular candidate got elected, right?
right.
In the fall, I did get a chance to watch the presidential debate between Harris and Trump with my
Mm.
parents in the room. We were
Oh.
at Vanderbilt University at a campus wide watch party because I was speaking there. And
Uh,
boy, every time I thought, Trump said something completely outrageous, I would look at my mom like, like what's happening to her face, right? And every
uh,
time that she and my dad thought that Kamala was kind of squirming out of accountability for something that she ought
uh,
to be held to, they looked at me. And so we
mm,
were doing that across the table with these other college students, right? The next morning, we ended up having like an hour and a half debate about the debate. And
uh,
it was the same rough and tumble as it's always been. Um, but we learned a lot. We learned a lot about it. They could sort of
mhm.
conceded that Kamala won. Actually, my dad didn't. My dad did not concede that. He would not concede that. He looks at it very differently, and
Uh-huh.
respect to my dad, like all good. But that's
Yeah.
just one window into it.
Hmm.
I called them the day after the election, after I had visited one of my friends who was in a deep pain about the result. And honestly, I felt like I needed to call them because that friend, it's hard. It's hard for that pain to be seen by the other side
Yeah.
in it's and this is true for reds and blues. I've seen this so often, Angel, where if you're on the red side or the blue side, you believe your fears are real and the other side's fears are completely hokey and completely imagined. And
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that argument over and over
Hmm.
from both sides, right? So
Hmm.
it felt important to bring the fear and the pain like to my parents and just be like here.
Hmm.
And I was crying as I was telling them about it,
Hmm.
And we had an incredible conversation about what isn't said, because one of the things that I know, my blue friends don't hear is all the people on the right who vote for Trump but don't want any harm to come to Black people, Hispanic people, gay people, trans people. That's
Hmm.
not what they want. It's not what motivated their vote. But the things we hear, that's not interesting. That's not sexy. It doesn't make Fox News or CNN. Nobody's saying that.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
it was about that. So we had a really productive conversation about that. And I was kind of going,
Hmm.
I don't know, guys, like, do you know Harris voters near you? Could you go and talk to them? Could you
Hmm.
tell them these things about, and honestly, I mean, because part of their answer and what I relate to was sort of like, is it, I don't know, we just kind of want to live our lives. We just want to live our
Mm.
lives. Oh,
I can hear people. I can very easily hear and connect to a response from people saying, "Oh, well, that must be nice."
yeah,
Right? Like, oh, you just want to live your life after having
yeah,
voted for someone who's going to directly affect mine, and now I can't live mine.
right.
I'm curious if that has come up and what their response might be to, or what their response was to the story you told them of these people who are
Yeah.
frightened.
Oh, I mean, I remember one piece of a story, and this person did tell me that if I wanted to share this piece that I could. So, um, one of my friends who's queer, and I was on her couch with her, and maybe a week before the election, she had been texting with her mother, who voted Trump and is conservative,
Mm,
and there's been a relationship there, a very conflicted one, but there's been one on and off, and she had gotten to this place with her mother where her mother had said, this is just too hard. Please, let's not talk about politics. And my friend had said,
mm,
no, this is important to me. So finally, the mother had said, okay, send me articles. Send me articles. I'll look at them. And so my friend sent her mother articles like on the phone and stuff. Days went by, no acknowledgement of reception of the articles, nothing said at all. And I'm
mm,
sitting there with my friend. And one of the things that's really making her the saddest is that my mother's not. What's going on? Is she afraid to talk to me? Why didn't she even acknowledge any of this? Doesn't she know? And when I passed that on to my mom, that was when I heard my mom kind of
mm,
feel it, like, oh no. What's
mm,
wrong with her mother? My mom's like, what's wrong with her mother? Why isn't
mm,
her mother there for her? So I guess your question is more about, well, how nice to sort of be over here on the end. And
mm,
that's where, I mean, that's true. And I think the blue side has a pretty advanced reading of the word privilege. Um, Certainly have been
right.
talking about privilege a long time.
Hmm.
So privilege always goes to the victor, right?
Yeah.
To the victor go the spoils. I
Mm,
think that one of the most difficult but sort of glittering challenges for the red side right now is that the capacity for grace, like grace is in such high demand, and the capacity for it is going to be greater at a moment like this with the victor. The ones
hmm.
who have the privilege of not having to face the fears that they too were drowning in
Hmm.
and have just been absolved of.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is another good conversation with my parents. So thank you. To try to bring it a little more, push a little more on that. But but
Yeah.
but I but I
Don't
but I
tell them I did it.
empathize. I won't. But I do empathize. People want to live their lives.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know.
this brings me to another question about, you described our information and civic environment as shards of broken glass. And I think we're touching on that already.
Yeah.
But expand a little bit about on that and tell us what you're thinking there, because I think we're probably going to zero in on this as being the source of so much of what we're talking about already.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah.
tell us a little bit about the broken glass.
Yeah. As a journalist, right? When I started writing this book in 2020, and I wrote in my introduction about how I felt around the media ecosystem, I was already starting to feel like you're a traitor to your own. Don't go
Hmm.
attacking, the media and journalism. You're part of the media and journalism. You know how hard it is. You know the economics are brutal. You know the incentives are tough. I can tell you all the reasons why, the rhetoric of it is what it is, and why the headlines have to tug at every possible heartstring that could lead you to click on them. It has to.
Mm.
Otherwise, people
Hmm.
get fired, Angel. you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why they have to build loyalty. I mean, loyalty is the only security in online news and media. Even if your audience is relatively small, if you know them and know who they are and they feel like you get them, you're good. You're home free. You can build a business off of that.
Right.
So our media environment is shards of broken glass because that works so well that th those different places don't have to talk to each other. They don't have to create spaces that can fit many perspectives. They don't have to. And in fact, it's easier to build loyalty in a tight knit community that is lucrative if you don't.
Hmm.
And so those incentives exist. Do we have a pluralistic media environment? Well, we do in the sense that, boy, you can find, like you said, flavors every which
Hmm.
way, 31 flavors and
Hmm.
more, right? But
Hmm.
it's certainly not pluralistic in that part of the way you build that loyalty, you build your us by having a them. You
Yeah.
build a culture where everyone else is pushed away and maligned and made alien. And
Hmm.
so that sucks. That sucks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you and I are cut from a similar cloth, and maybe it's a temperamental thing, maybe it's a nurture thing. I don't know. We've talked about this a little before, and you can expand on this, but we see something like what you're describing, and we go, I don't know. I don't like this. Like I was just at an event where I started to feel profoundly uncomfortable because I noticed that everyone in the room was agreeing with each other. And immediately I start looking for the exit. Like I want to crack a window because I'm starting to suffocate. Like I just I don't like it. I don't like that feeling because I feel like I know now if everyone's just yesing everybody and going, yeah, I know. Oh my God, yes. And just
Mm-hmm.
doing that thing, I start to get nervous because I feel like there's something we were missing and that thing is probably really important.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna feel like such an idiot in an hour or a day or whatever when we realize, we missed
Mm-hmm.
this thing. So I have a feeling you're kind of like that too. You start wondering, okay, well, who can I ask a question to? How can I push this? And my thing is to become the devil's advocate. So I will be in there and I will say, just like I did a minute ago, I can already hear people in my head saying the opposite of what you guys are saying. So now what? But not everyone's wired this way, right? A lot of the people who are listening, it probably hasn't even occurred to them this idea of there's something to understand that I don't already understand. And
Right.
it's not, we all do this, right? I mean, even I do this, even though we're in this work, right? We do this because it's human nature. It's just human
Yeah.
nature to say, well, no, of course, the world is how I see it because I'm looking at it right now. It just is. But
Yeah.
we have to observe our own perceptions and recognize that we're filtering things all the time,
All the
right?
time.
But you and I we have consciously trained ourselves to notice that stuff so that we can point it out, so that we could try to help. But how can other people do the same thing? What are some things for, that someone who's never this has never occurred to them, this doesn't come naturally to them.
Yeah.
What can they do to pull themselves out of
Right.
that automatic kind of thinking?
Well, first I think I want to address the thought experiment,
Hmm.
which is that if you're in a room where everybody agrees, but it is the right thing to believe, the bravest,
Right.
best thing to believe,
Hmm.
then That's great. Like that in that situation, that's great. We know from research, Cass Sunstein is probably the best known researcher on this. When you surround yourself with people who have your same opinion, you tend to hold that opinion even stronger by the end of it. And you tend to want to take bolder steps in favor of that opinion. So that's what happens when you surround yourself with people who may or may not share your opinion. Then, okay, it's not like mobilization is as fast, right? So that's true. We know that. Problem comes with the unknown and the unknowing and the uncertainty. How could you ever possibly know that the room you're in actually has it all 100%? You got an A+ on the test. You didn't make a single mistake. Every single person in there is just, wow, super enlightened right now on this one thing. And I don't think those rooms exist ever. Maybe some of them get to 95. Like if you were to put some kind of omnipotent, God-given, moral metric and intellectual metric on it, maybe. But boy,
this evidence, room is a 97 right
now. Sure, of course, obviously, you and I mean, come on, right?
Because obviously we are correct. Yeah,
right.
We are morally correct. Yeah.
But because that is such a remote possibility, and then look around, look at how divided we are. Look at how much money is made by dividing us. It is a lot easier to believe, right? That it is a lot easier to believe that somebody benefits from us putting ourselves in those rooms and believing that we are right every single time and that all the agreement is exactly delivering the truth and the wonderful things, and that the shards of broken glass are righteous, except, no, it's my shard. No, it's my shard. No, it's my shard. No, it's your shard. Right. We know that can't hold. That can't hold. So how do you do it? I think you already kind of nailed a couple of things. I have the same radar that goes off when even a small group around me all seems to be agreeing, is exactly when I ask myself, what do you really think, Monica? Because the temptation is to agree because it's social. It's social cohesion. That's the psychology in that situation. We lose our freedom and our independence when our social cohesion makes us forget to ask ourselves what we actually think. And the more social cohesion there is, the less that anybody really cares, because they all assume, well, you're in the room with me, we're all nodding. You agree with me, there's nothing more to say. And if there's nothing more to say, then I'm not going to get any questions, challenges, invitations to nuance at all.
Right.
Which after a while makes our beliefs pretty simplistic.
Yeah.
Friction is good no matter what, because it keeps us on our toes. It keeps us learning.
But
so
that's
notice that. Go ahead.
That's another temperamental thing, though, right? Like the enjoying friction.
Say more.
For I think the natural thing is, if we feel friction, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. If we're feeling pressure, something's wrong. I need to alleviate that. That's our instinct. So if we're in the room with a bunch of people saying things that we think are crazy and harmful and wrong, we're going to be like, I need to get out of here. I'm not going to engage with this. Right. So how do we counteract that? Because what we're basically saying, what you and I espouse all the time, is no, be in that room, engage with that, see what happens. Right. But then I can easily see someone saying, well, no, I don't want to be poisoned by this horrible stuff. I don't want to be harmed by this horrible stuff. I don't want this horrible stuff to be perpetuated. So how do we counteract that? Because that's a very natural and understandable reaction to have.
Absolutely. And the anecdote I think of here, you and I both know about the man, the myth, the legend. He's not a myth. Daryl Davis, who always serves as that example of the farthest reach of what's possible. Although I always say that it's not what's practical. And Daryl Davis is a Black blues musician who, through sitting down and talking with card-carrying white supremacists, he has a collection of dozens and dozens and dozens of Ku Klux Klan robes that were handed to him by people who, in getting to know him, realized the absurdity of their hate. Now, that's an extraordinary story. Like, it's hard to deny the impact of 200 fewer card-carrying white supremacists, right? Like on hate in this country and all of that. I was talking to my friend Baratunde Thurston, who hosts the How to Citizen podcast. He's amazing. And he too is Black. And, he's heard about Daryl and he thinks about Daryl. And he said, "That's Daryl Davis. My name is Baratunde Thurston. Talking
Mhm.
to a member of the Ku Klux Klan is going to do more to me than for me."
Yeah.
And I thought that was put so beautifully because you illustrated that concept of sort of being in that room where people start saying things that are crazy. That's where then you have to kind of look at, okay, where am I? Am I in a place of, and this is where we go into somatics and things, but psychological safety. The
Mhm.
trauma responses will come out, right? So the
Yeah.
trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Um, and this is where some practice at low risk exposures, like don't put yourself right in the lion's den. Don't talk to a Nazi
Mhm.
tomorrow. What is that? That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy, right? But but if you build the short bridges, so somebody who agrees with you on everything except this one bit about abortion, you would still vote the same way, but it's we disagree on this. Have that conversation. Experience the discomfort of that. Experience the friction of that, right? And then
Yeah.
hop to another issue, immigration. This person I know is a little bit different. Let me spend time in that for a while. And then
Mhm.
our, a wonderful teacher, John Powell, great bridge builder, talks about how after a while of building short bridges, you may be able to be in that room where people are saying
Mhm.
some crazier things, or what seem to you to be crazier things, and then maybe you don't feel as unsafe because you've already experienced what it's like to be
Mhm.
in disagreement on things that just bug you, whatever it is for you. I mean, one step closer, right? One step closer
Yeah.
to curiosity. It does not have to be, and it should not be for everybody's benefit. Like, it should not be a big jump. It should be
Mhm.
find
Mhm.
your edge and push it a little. That's
Yeah.
it. That's enough.
Mhm. And I think it's important to note, I mean, yeah, what your friend said is totally valid, right? Like talking to white supremacists is not going to be good for me. That's not my bag.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Luckily for him and for all of us, there are very, very few of those people. And
Yeah.
you're actually unlikely to meet any of those people in your everyday life. Who you're more likely to meet are just regular people who just happen to disagree with you about
Right.
XYZ. And it doesn't mean those things don't matter. It doesn't mean that those conversations won't be difficult, right? But
Right.
if we recognize, as you said, the extent of what is possible, right? That white supremacists are people that the vast majority of us would agree or would immediately think are these people are too far gone. There's no hope for them. It's over,
Right.
right? Like how can you pull somebody back from the brink of that?
Yeah.
If one man can do that 200 times plus
Right.
by himself, by simply showing humanity to someone who doesn't believe they are human, right?
Oof.
We can talk to our neighbor, we can talk to our coworker, we can talk to our uncle at Thanksgiving, we can talk to
Mm-hmm.
these people who are nowhere
Mm-hmm.
near that level, right? Maybe they hold beliefs that you find
Yeah.
just as hateful or harmful or wrong, but they're nowhere near that level of far gone. And if those
Yeah.
people who we would consider are totally far gone can still be brought back, then
Yeah.
so can your uncle, so can your coworker, so can your colleague.
I love the way you're putting
Um,
it because it's not a model to follow so much as a reason for perspective. A reason for
yeah,
perspective. Right?
right. I have
Um,
no intention of visiting any
yeah.
clan meetings or anything like that.
Right.
That's not, I'm not into, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he did that
Yeah.
and it's not a fluke. He's done it many, many times and he's
Yeah.
not the only person either, right? It
Yeah.
just shows what's possible.
Yeah.
But I can still feel people being skeptical.
Oh, very much so. Very
Uh,
much so.
so, and I think maybe a bunch of people have in mind right now, why on earth would I do that to begin with? What's the point?
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people? Say, why would I do that? What is the
Mm.
point of even trying to do this?
Right.
You say we're divided. So what? It's because they're wrong. Screw them.
Right.
What
Right.
would you say in response to that?
Yeah. And getting far away from the example of, a bridge
Right.
as big as Daryl crossed, right? Something
Right.
smaller, but as big and challenging as the red blue divide.
Yeah.
Um,
They voted differently last week.
they
And here
voted
we are.
differently last week, and they're monsters for
Right.
that. Uh,
Yeah.
they want the end of democracy. What else can possibly explain it? They want
Hmm.
harm to come to me or to my friends who are not straight white males.
Right.
These are the fears. These are the things.
Hmm.
Why would you want to talk to them? So one is to kind of examine your relationship, right? I mean, you can imagine the stranger, and you can imagine the person in your family, the person in at your work, the person who is actually already an acquaintance. You just aren't sure how to bring that up. Most of us have somebody. So there's that. It's like, first think of the relationship. Um, Having the relationship, that's already a connection. That's already a bridge. One of the responses that people have, one of the reactions people have is that the only right thing to do for me is to burn the bridge. I must get rid of this relationship. By
Hmm.
association, I am tainted, or if I get rid of the relationship, I may deter the belief. I may hurt them so badly that they'll see the error in their ways and they'll come around. Look, we've
Mm.
tried that. People have tried that. It doesn't work. People don't
Yeah.
change their beliefs for that. They can't. Our beliefs are not something that we can choose based on who we want to like us. That's not how it works, first of all. Now,
Hmm.
the other thing, if you deeply care about certain issues, right? And you can map all of this to conservatives as well, by the way. You deeply
Yeah.
care about these issues, you probably want more people to agree with you. Well, then we come into the beautiful world of persuasion. And in the beautiful, true world of persuasion,
Yeah.
not talking to people doesn't persuade. Shaming people tends to confirm their worst beliefs about you, which makes it even harder for them to hear you generously, which makes it harder to be persuaded by you.
Mm.
Um, and distance from them in any kind of way, condescension, speaking down to them, um, not a great tactic for persuasion either. Um, Works well for war. In war,
Yeah.
all these things are brilliant, really good. So what do we want to be? Do we want to be at war?
Yeah.
Do we want to destroy people? Um,
Hmm.
because that's what happens. But if we want to persuade, if we actually want to change the world, it's like, okay, you can do the political calculus. Well, I'll just change the world by strengthening my side. Okay, but this that if we're talking about blues, your side just lost. So
Hmm. So, so that leaves us with the
so
question of, okay, how do we move forward from here? Right. I think probably the vast majority of people tuning in right now are blues. There are people who did not get their way last week. Uh, and they're wondering, okay, so what do you expect me to do now? What should I do now? What can I do now? How
yeah,
do we move forward from here? So you
right.
and I have been talking and thinking about this, of course, but I'd
Yeah.
love to hear what you would say.
Yeah. And I this is gonna sound very zen-y, but oh well. I'm trying to stay away from things like should, because
Hmm.
what people are going to do, what you should do is what you're going to need to do. Like
Hmm.
there's me trying to persuade you that you should choose a different path that I prefer for you is what is that? I don't
Right.
even know you. I
Hmm.
don't know you. I care about this country and by extension every person on this call. I don't know who you are. I don't know your journey. I don't know the kind of pain you've been through. I can
Hmm.
imagine it. But no, I can't tell you what this is going to look like. I think everybody has to go through their journey their way. Um
Hmm.
I can say that in my experience and in my research, it's a brighter path to go toward more openness than more closedness, to be able to get there at some point, even if it's the tiniest little step, even if it's one step a year, it doesn't matter. Just one step closer is enough. Um, Even if, and in fact, this is often what I say, before the election when it didn't feel like the ground beneath our feet was shaking, and my confidence in everything I've said has just been kind of been like, let's make sure we keep our eyes wide open here. Um, is This is not ultimately about the because the goal is for red and blue America to talk to each other so that we don't end up destroying each other. That is the goal. That is my goal. I'm transparent about that.
Hmm.
Just because that's the goal doesn't mean that's got to be what the first step looks like. The first and most important step, especially if you're in a place of immobility, you can't take one step closer to the person on the other side. That's okay. Because where you can apply your curiosity is within, into yourself.
Mm.
Ask yourself how you came to believe the things that you believe, including the things you're most concerned about and most afraid of. When you catch yourself in that moment of certainty that somebody else is a monster for what they believed or how they voted, question that certainty, right? Because that is a pervasive assumption all across our politics. Again, sort of amplified by money. It's gross. That people who disagree with me must be crazy, stupid, or evil. Question that. Question that. And also, another pernicious assumption that I observe everywhere, because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. We swim in it. Is if somebody opposes what I support politically, they must hate what I love. There's no other explanation.
Right.
Question that. Because their variables for their decision, their vote, their political choice may not resemble your variables much at all. So what you think is sort of a finite, mathematical equation with all terms sort of adding up and there can be no more. They've got different variables, but if you don't see them, if you don't wonder, then you'll never know. So you first have to see that your equation is not absolute. That you may not know. And I know how that sounds, especially when like moral certainty comes in. That sounds like letting the devil in. I know how that sounds and how that can feel. And that's where, I mean, I guess all I can say is like the path I have walked has shown me how wrong I have been about people. How unbelievably wrong. And how much pain I inflict when I think people are monsters. When I don't even know them.
Yeah.
Aren't I the monster when I do that?
Right. Yeah. I am Legend. Right. Not to spoil the the story, but that's the point of that book. That's where that title comes from.
I didn't know that.
It's the the Will Smith movie. They changed the ending because it was upsetting to the viewers. But the original ending of the book, spoiler alert, is that this man who's been hunting and killing zombies as the last man on Earth realizes that these zombies are sentient and that they care about their own, and that the only reason they've been attacking him and trying to break into his lair or whatever it is because he's been kidnapping a bunch of them and doing experiments on them to try to figure out how to unzombify them. But to them, this guy is this boogeyman who shows up in the middle of the night and steals some of their people and does crazy experiments on them, and they never see their friends again. Right?
Yeah.
And then he realizes this, and that's why it's called I Am Legend, because he is their boogeyman. The whole time he's thinking, I'm the last man on Earth. I'm the last good person. I'm the last human, and everyone else is a monster. Until he realizes I'm the monster, actually.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're reminding me of the most challenging episode to make and produce because of the tender themes it touched on a Braver Way is episode 17, which is with Kai Cheng Tom. She's a trans activist and an extraordinary bridge builder. And she wrote this book called Falling in Love with Being Human that I highly recommend. She's a poet.
Wow.
She's extraordinary. And each poem sort of piece is a love letter to someone that she's had a hard time holding in her heart, including many people whose views, oppose where trans people would really prefer things to be, like politically and culturally in all these places. And she wrote an open letter to J.K. Rowling, and that was one of the essays. So J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, writer, is known pretty widely for some controversial to the progressive left stances on gender identity, and really been like the boogeyman and the monster. And so anyway, Kai does this reflection on what it is to be the monster. Many people in America see trans people as the monster. She knows what that is. She knows what that's like. One of the lines, as she puts herself in J.K. Rowling's shoes in the most mind-blowing way you can imagine, she says a line that I will never forget, which is, "What is a monster? A monster is something you're afraid to find in the mirror. A monster is something you're afraid to find in the mirror." And a lot of times we we end up like we make projections. We really do. I've thought about this with social media, Angel.
Hmm.
It sort of dawned on me like in a weird way, like duh. A couple weeks ago, like social media is not social. It never has been.
Hmm.
Mostly what we're doing on social media, right? Like mostly what we're doing on social media is we are talking either to ourselves, like we are having ruminations that
Hmm.
cycle. Um, and who we are talking with is the projections of other people because we don't get to see them, barely know their names. We probably don't even see their faces.
Hmm.
It's projections of who other people are based on little text strings and the stories we piece together in our imaginations.
Hmm.
And as I said in my book, and appears to just never sort of fall too far from my mind, whoever is underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your imagination. We're
Right.
speaking to projections, and those projections are sourced here. They're
Hmm.
here, unless you get close enough to see who someone really is, what they really believe, and how they actually came to it, what their actual motives are for believing the thing they believe.
Right.
So unless you do that in some, even like I said, tiny little way,
Hmm.
um, yeah,
That
that
gets me
that
to
good.
that gets me to the last thing I want to talk to you about before we start pulling some questions. We've got some good questions here. But one thing that we were sort of talking about earlier today, you and I,
Mm,
and is the undercurrent here, is another tendency we have of assuming that any one person is representative of the whole
yeah,
and the assumptions we make on that basis, which is again a very human assumption. We all make it. It happens all the time. That's stereotyping is a natural human impulse. That's how
right,
we do it, right? Our brain needs to find shortcuts, and this is one of those. But it often doesn't do us well, right? The metaphor of the moth to a flame, the reason why moths go into flames and set themselves on fire is because they're evolved to follow moonlight. And so they get tricked by all this artificial light, these candles. So that's why they're always flickering on above on your ceiling, right? So we do similar things. Now, the leader of the party that was just elected and the people who elected him are not identical. And they don't have the exact same personality and they don't have the exact same flaws. Now, there's something connecting them, right? Because these people were moved to vote for this man, but they're not the same person. And if you spoke to the president elect and you spoke to one of the people who elected him, you would have different conversations, right?
very,
So how do we keep that in mind as we move forward here? Because this is what's going to happen is we're going to find ourselves
yeah,
facing these people and these assumptions are going to flood in. We're going to see President Trump and we're going to think you voted for that.
yeah,
You said okay to that. How and that once that happens, it becomes very difficult for anyone to see the person in front of them. They're just going to see the
right,
avatar for all the things they don't like. So how would you counsel people to avoid that trap? And why is it a
yeah.
trap?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the parallel being I often think of parenting analogies because I'm a parent of two
Hmm.
children
Hmm.
and my life is steeped into that. And it's kind of every now and then I'm in rooms where I'm with other people's kids and other parents, and then I see some kid do something awful, and the parent lets it go.
Hmm.
And my question is why isn't that being punished?
Hmm.
Why isn't that being punished? Aren't we all in agreement that that is not okay? Why is that not being punished? And I can relate to that frustration where you see this person behave in ways that why isn't that being punished? Is that being rewarded? Is that being rewarded? I get that. So I want to really connect with that because that's a flame in me, let me tell you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um so look, one of the things that our media environment has also done, shards of broken glass, but also every now and then, one of those pieces of glass is this giant magnifying glass. and everything else falls away. And that candidate who just won, I don't know how he's done it, but he's convinced everyone that he is all we need to look at and all we need to think about and interact with and all of that. I mean, it's an extraordinary kind of accomplishment for someone in media his whole life. He knows how to do that, but that's also a choice that we can make that is a different choice. One of, to me, the tragedies since Trump kind of came onto the scene is that we haven't been able to look away from Trump and look toward our neighbors and look at each other. Like, we're the ones holding our democracy. We're the ones sharing the common ground. So really, I'm answering your question by saying this is a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to talk to Trump. No one on this call is ever going to talk to Trump.
Right.
I'm pretty, okay, I'm not 100% sure about that, but
most likely
it's going to happen. You can talk to and build trust with and get to know the people who think that Trump is not the monster you think he is for various reasons. So, you know, you and I, Angel, we're just on a podcast with my friend Travis, for whom Trump is actually someone who is going to restore democracy that he feels has already withered, through things like, you know, how we hear each other and don't hear each other. And anyway, he feels this extraordinary relief and joy, and he's excited to build the future. And he thinks Trump is running the Unity Party. But the Unity Party is actually Trump's.
Yeah.
Right? Which I know comes as a shock, as the idea that could be the belief. But you could talk to Travis, right? And I've talked to him. Like, this is real for him, 100%. And anyway, so there's also that is like, we're all dead wrong about something. We may be wrong about, you know, a lot of this. And so keep that in mind too. Only by ensuring that we don't burn all the connections we have to people who disagree with us can we ensure that our democracy will continue. That, to me, that's the bedrock of democracy. The bedrock of American democracy is the ground level, the foundation, and the foundation is talking to people who don't like your ideas. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. The founding fathers from the beginning were like, let's put that in effing ink and sign it onto this document at the National Archives. Like, this is what we're here to do. We are a radical republic. The world has seen nothing like this. They think we're crazy and it's not going to last. It's almost been 250 years. We can't give up now.
No.
So that's the mindset shift.
Yeah. But we're also still young and scrappy, and we're still trying to figure this weird thing out that we're trying. It's still an experiment.
Right. And let's not forget how difficult that experiment is, because it's out of America that, and boy, this is where, like, I hope not to be American supremacist here. I'm Mexican too. Going to try, but I actually do love this country deeply. The biggest gift conservatives have given me since I've become friends with more of them is to just embrace my patriotism. But yeah, one of the things that I think America has bred within it is freedom and liberty for more people, more different kinds of people, to stand up and say, I am me, and this is who I am, and this is how I am. And cultures from other places going, I am me, and this is who we are, and we're going to plant ourselves in this country, and we're going to build a life, right? And nobody's saying, and there's disagreement here, and I am overgeneralizing, but nobody's saying, no, you all have to behave exactly the same way because of this or that. Like, we are the crazy place, you know, in the world that has been like, come on, we'll figure it out. Come on. And so I think somehow for some reason on the left, here we go. I believe this. I think for some reason on the left, it is easier to welcome who we see as the outsider and to make space for them than to welcome people who feel more like they've just been here and they've had their opinions.
That's interesting.
So I don't know. So like your grandmother or your sister who is conservative or whatever, it's just, they don't feel novel and exciting and interesting in that way. And so they're the problem. They're the problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that actually leads to the first question here. One of our participants is blue and considering moving away from the red state where they live. And they're asking, if you were us, why would you not move?
mm. Well, that's one where I have to give the kind of cop out answers. Like it so depends on your circumstance. I
Hmm.
find that in the last several years, there have been policies that I see as reasonable if it leads people to want to move to a different state, like abortion. I can
Hmm.
understand why,
Yeah.
many women would feel more comfortable living in a state that conforms to their view of what abortion,
Yeah.
you know, should where when it should be allowed or not allowed, and at what point. And it goes the other way too. I also believe that there are folks with deep faith values, who wouldn't want to live in a too blue state if they believe that abortion is murder, kind of a thing. So
Hmm.
there's things like that that I think are real. So that's a very, very personal decision. I do think though that like anything else, we just have to be very conscious of our fears, just mindful of them, aware of them. What is it that we're afraid of? Have we
Right.
experienced that thing? Um, Not long ago, I was speaking with somebody who is conservative, and we were talking about pronouns. And he disagrees pretty strongly with some of kind of the gender identity conversation on the left that has sort of come into these spaces where people are asked to share their pronouns and maybe even really pressured to do so, and he isn't okay with that kind of thing. And he was saying something like, and they'll force me, like they'll force me to share my pronouns. And I said,
Yeah.
well, has that happened? Has anyone forced you to share your pronouns? And he's like, no, but they could. I'm like, yeah, but has it happened?
Hmm.
Well, no. Okay. So, okay. And just
Hmm.
introducing that little bit of, okay, but have you seen that? Like,
Yeah.
and then if you've a lot of times people say, well, I've seen it in the news. Okay.
Right.
So maybe it happened once or even 10 times or even 100 times out of seemingly infinite communities and infinite moments and collisions of people all across this country. I'll
Mm.
tell you, Angel, real quick, that like back in the day in journalism, when I was just coming up in like the mid aughts, our journalism conferences had sessions on fear mongering, how to be responsible journalists by not fear mongering. I will tell you,
Right.
those sessions have disappeared. We
Yeah.
no
I bet.
longer have sessions to make sure that we don't exaggerate fears. Anyway, so yeah,
We
it's
probably have
like,
the other one. We probably have the opposite. How
I
to
mean,
fear monger
how to fear monger. Well,
effectively.
but of course it's not called that, right? It's how to
Right.
it's how to make sure that we're okay.
Galvanization 101.
Right. But let's empathize. It's how to make
Yeah.
sure we're okay.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these fears, absolutely. And I am so afraid. Here's a fear of mine. I'm afraid that tonight, the way I'm talking about fear, it's like somehow I'm invalidating them all. I am
Hmm.
very concerned about a lot of things. Like I
Yeah.
know the
Same.
power of fear, and fear locks us up. Fear keeps us from being creative. Fear keeps us from seeing beyond our what it takes to survive. We can't. There's so much we can't do when we're too afraid. So it's
Hmm.
also that we want to change the world. Be mindful of your fear.
Yeah.
It will
And
save you, but don't waste your fear on anything but danger.
right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. Um, okay. So from Cheryl at National Institute for Civil Discourse. So a
Oh,
compatriot of
Cheryl.
ours.
I know Cheryl.
When people are feeling exhausted or overwhelmed by the polarization, what do you recommend to start fostering their curiosity about others?
Mm. I mean, take a
Yeah.
beat. Take a beat.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I've been exhausted and overwhelmed by polarization quite a bit. And
Me too.
my husband, yeah, right? Like,
Yeah. Me
I
too.
need to be told by people who love me, stop,
Yeah.
take a beat, take a break. Because no
Yeah.
one's brain was designed to be in this amount of information and overload. And then what happens to me is I get burdened. I use the word burdened. I get so concerned. And it just
Hmm.
then I break. Like I'm not gonna
Yeah.
serve anyone in that sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, so how to engage? Yeah, give yourself a lot of grace. Also, the ground is shifting beneath our feet right now. One of my other deep concerns is here I am being asked by people to give my thoughts on things. Everything's changing. The good, like not everything, but you know what I mean. Like the emotional landscape and the political landscape is shifting, and people are still trying to sort it all out, and it hasn't finished shaking. So this is not the time to try to get a grip on what's happening because it's going to change tomorrow. It's
Right.
moving very fast. So
Yeah.
what do you do when something's moving very fast? You cut
Yeah.
yourself a lot of slack. Don't think you're going to get to any final answers. And really do pay attention to the emotional landscape. Number one.
Hmm.
Number one
Yeah.
is
And
emotion. Don't even get to any kind of argument
right.
unless it's invited by the other party, by the
Yeah.
other side.
But also, yeah, give yourself a break, but also, take bites that you can chew,
Yes.
right? I mean, Superman needs to be Clark Kent for a while, every once in a while, right?
Yes.
That he can't do that 24/7. Even he would get, right? So it's just, but I'm reminded actually of a scene from another superhero movie. The Flash is freaking out. He's having a panic attack. He's like, I can't hang out with these other people. I can't save the world. I'm not a superhero. I'm just an idiot. What am I going to do? And Batman just says, just save one person.
Yeah.
Save one person and then save another person and
Beautiful.
then save another person. That's it. Just focus
Yeah.
on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So if that one thing at a time is you and saying, I don't have the energy or the bandwidth to do this well, Monica and I were talking about this earlier today, and I always say this. Not every conversation needs to be had right now,
Right.
and not every conversation needs to be had by you. And it is better to disengage or to not engage at all than to engage poorly, right? At least you're not contributing to the problem. So if you need to step back, if you're just not feeling yourself in that place, that's okay. You don't have to. And it's better
100%.
for you. Don't do the opposite. Don't
Yeah.
don't make it worse. Don't say, I don't have the time to be patient. I don't have the energy to be curious. So I'm going to be hostile instead. Don't do that because that's just
No.
not helping. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
That's it.
so there are a lot of questions along the lines of, from your experience engaging with people who disagree with you, do you have tips on how to do it? I mean, this is
Mm.
a
I
this is
mean,
a
that's the
layup
whole
for you.
thing. That's
This
the
is a
whole
layup for
thing.
you.
How to
Well,
engage with
Monica
people
has
who
a,
disagree with
a
me.
wonderful book
Oh,
called I Never Thought of It That Way, which you can pick up, and it has tons of tips in it for
yeah.
doing that.
I
So
mean,
that's, yeah.
yeah,
Go
there's
ahead.
so
Do you want to
much
add
and we
anything?
don't have time, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, do kind of take your own internal temperature, right? And make sure that you're not you're not so afraid that you can't be curious. You can't wonder about something you think is out to get you.
Hmm.
But if curiosity does have a voice in you, then step right in, step right up to that. And curiosity is not judgmental. Ted Lasso said this very nicely. But but yeah, you can't be both at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Curiosity requires humility. So bear in mind what you don't know. You don't know this other person, that's for sure.
Hmm.
You don't.
Some,
I'm married to my husband for a long time. I don't know him, so I sure as heck don't know. This other like we're all bottomless
he's,
mysteries.
he's not that complicated. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
He's not that
yeah.
complicated. You're
I'll let
making,
him know.
but
um,
no,
but
I
yeah,
one thing that I always try to tell people and that I remind myself is that it's much easier if you flip it. If you flip the circumstance completely. Here's someone who is completely misunderstanding you, misrepresenting you. They don't get you at all. They think you have completely different reasons for the things you care about and believe than you actually do. How does that feel? And what would you say to them if you could?
yeah.
Whoa, you're totally wrong. You don't get me at all. No, no, no. I have good reasons. Look, I can show
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
Right? That's how we would all feel if we were misrepresented the way that we tend to misrepresent others.
That's right.
So just remember that and flip it. Flip that paradigm around and go, okay, I must be misrepresenting them in some way that they would find just ghastly, right? They
Yes,
would just be
exactly.
flabbergasted by how much I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you realize that, there's the fundamental attribution error, right? I have reasons, they have excuses,
Exactly. Exactly.
you
I
know?
have real fears. They have imagined,
Yes,
fantasies. But
right.
that's just not true. So it's really, what am I missing? What am I missing? You
Hmm.
come in with that question, it'll be easier
Yeah,
to not be so judgmental, because some people think being curious just means I'm asking questions. Oh, no, no. Some questions are so dripping with condescension. I mean, it'll end the
hmm,
conversation right there. You've got to watch for that too. People can see
right.
right through that. And boy, are they used to it across this
Yeah,
divide. Boy, are
yeah.
they used to it. They're not going to
Why
stick
are you
around
a
for that.
terrible person? Why are
Yeah,
you a
like,
terrible person? That's a
right,
question.
right. So you come to someone saying, I want to be curious,
Yeah,
they do see that. Even if you try to kind of police your words,
right.
it's a spirit. It kind of comes out of you. So
It has to be sincere.
it really does. And then
Hmm.
I really find that among the extremely curious questions to ask, instead of what do you think about whatever, ask what are your concerns about this issue? Because
Hmm.
they can give you one and then they can give you another, and you can say anything else and they will give you more. People tend to begin
Yeah,
by sharing the concern that everybody has and that they
right,
think that you will be most willing to accept, the thing that's already on social media, whatever. But if you keep going, well, what else, what else, what else, they'll start to tell you who they are and what they really think and what they are really concerned about. There was that thing that happened
right.
to me, or for
Yeah.
me, I don't know about everybody else, but this. And now you're going to start to get to know them, because that's where the
Hmm.
magic happens. Where people start feeling known by you, seen by you, that's when trust starts to build.
Yeah.
And the other really curious question is, instead of why do you believe this thing, how did you come to believe this thing? Tell me the story of it, not the reasons, not the bullet points you wrote down. Because again, those tend to be copies of something. Tell me your story.
Yeah.
Tell me how you walk to it. And again, I'm not just learning some conceptual framework for why human X believes thing Y. I'm getting to know you as a
Right.
person, right?
Yeah.
And then last thing real quick, but like back to the concerns, when you ask somebody what they worry about, you learn what they care about. And that's where
Right.
common ground, believe it or not, is most easy to find, because
Yeah.
it looks like they don't care about freedom, they don't care about safety, they don't care about equal treatment for all people. That's wrong.
Right.
Everybody cares about those things. It's just we
Hmm.
stack them in a different order for different issues where they're put into tension with each other.
Hmm.
And you can't get close enough to see that, right? If you just think they don't share my values, they hate freedom.
Right.
That doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean? Like notice that, because that doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
So yeah, those are just some.
Yeah. So there are two questions I think we can answer at once. The first is what solutions make sense to fight political polarization at scale and to arrive at a shared reality? Because it seems insurmountable as people consume misinformation from algorithmized news
Yeah.
feeds embedded in their echo chambers. And the
Yes.
other question is tell us about braver angels.
Okay.
So
This the scale question. Ah, this might make me a Luddite. And I was a tech reporter for years, but it's that conditional at scale that I'm starting to really dislike. What solutions work at scale? It's like I get why we ask that. It's because let's go. Things are getting
hmm.
bad. We need to move fast and we need scalable solutions. And I agree. I think we do. We do need things that scale. But it's not just technologies of scale that can give us scale. Movements built scale before the iPhone. You know what I mean? Like before there was the internet, there was Gandhi. there,
Hmm.
there was MLK. Um, Before there was television, there were movements of people who built an organism of better ways to be together, and that thing spread. So I question that at scale, because I think what we tend to do is think of technology and think of buttons to press and programs to
Hmm.
write. And I think that the actual, the deepest problem is so human that the more time we spend trying to be over here coding and talking with some humans about how to reach the other humans. Like, I mean, I interviewed one person on my podcast, Chris Arnatti, who gave me such a big I never thought of it that way moment. He wrote a book called Dignity that is beautiful about the class divide. Talk about a blind spot. Gorgeous. And he when he gets to a city, he never takes an Uber. He's never been in an Uber in his life. He doesn't rent a car. He gets on the bus because he's this former hedge fund broker, college educated guy, elite guy, right? And he gets on the bus and he talks to people. He just talks to the people he sees. And now he's just kind of in this place of like, do you all realize how much time we spend not talking to people, telling ourselves that we're so far apart when they're right there? So that to me is the only solution at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
and tell us about Braver Angels. Braver Angels is we're I was just gonna roll off the thing, which I guess I do have to because it's a definition, but we're the nation's largest grassroots cross-partisan nonprofit dedicated to political polarization. We have over 100 chapters across the country, and each chapter has to be co-led by someone who leans liberal and someone who leans conservative. We have more than 50 offerings, workshops, debate programs where we tackle the most divisive issues using structures that allow people to engage in a collective search for truth, or at the very least, see past the stereotypes as they look to each other to contribute to something. It's remarkable. It's changed my life. A Braver Way is produced by Braver Angels. It's an extraordinary place to set one's feet because it appears like mixed spaces where all can be at least assumed to be good are often rare, and we need those spaces. So come
Yeah.
hang out. Come hang
Yeah.
out.
And if you're worried about scale, that's scale, right? You have
Yeah.
many, many individuals coming together to become an organization of people who do this thing at a bigger scale. You
Yeah.
have more people. I think that's the better way to look at scale, right? I, as an individual, can only do so much, but with the coalitions that I join,
Yes.
with the organizations that I support, now I'm scaling my actions.
That's it.
And now there are people and structures that are able to operate on a level that I can't individually. That's
Yes.
the beauty of this stuff. And that's the beauty of Braver Angels and Fair and Fire, right? So find these organizations and support them and
Yeah.
push for their missions. And that is working at scale. So you
Yeah.
can do both at once. You can zoom all the way in, zoom all the way out, right?
Yeah.
So we've got the Village Square. We've got all these wonderful, there's so many, right?
Yeah.
Bridge USA. There's so many wonderful organizations that we can
Yep.
support, that we can lend our efforts and resources
Yep.
to help do this at scale.
Exactly. And know that these organizations don't ask you to just, take your passions and just put them back there. Just come in and be nice, meet in the middle.
Right.
We just need to
That's
soothe
not,
each other.
no,
It's all about peace. No, 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 and no. We
right.
need to speak fully, freely, and without fear. And we
That's
need
right.
to develop skills to hear people for who they really are and what they really believe and begin there. That's what these
That's right.
organizations are truly about. Boy, is there a lot of misinformation about us out there. It's
Oh
bull
yeah.
crap.
Tell me
Don't
about it.
believe it. Don't believe
Tell me
it.
about it. Yeah, yeah. I have never sung Kumbaya in my entire life.
Not once.
Not once. Not
And we
once.
get into it. It is
Yeah,
testy. It's not a bunch of
it is. Yeah. And my favorite metaphor is if you look at a violin and you realize that like this is wood that's been chopped and cut and forced and contorted into this shape that is very unnatural. You'll never see it in nature, right? But it's been twisted and turned into this thing. It's got these strings of metal stretched across its neck, super tight, super tense. And the way you tune it is by turning that tension up and down to get the right sound. And the way you get sound out of it is by striking it with a bow of hair that is also stretched across a piece of wood, right? Tension, friction. That's how beautiful music is made. That's the only way. A piano, you have to hammer those keys, that trigger hammers, that hammer strings that are taut. That's how we do it. Tension is how music is made. So it's the only way forward. So before we close tonight, I just want to make sure to ask you all to click now on the link that we're putting in the chat window and complete this post-evaluation survey in the last few minutes of our program. We can't use the data that we have unless we do it both a pre and a post-evaluation. So please make sure to do that. And Monica, as we start closing up here, I'm sorry to all of you whose questions we didn't get to. They're such good questions. But where can people find you? How can people reach out to you if they want to get more connected to you and to Braver Angels? How do we do that?
Yep.
Let us
So
know.
A Braver Way, the podcast, available on all your podcast platforms. We have the last episode of the season, which Angel and I just recorded this morning, along with a cross-partisan panel of Trump and Harris voters. Comes out next Tuesday. Check that out. So it's A Braver Way. Braver Angels is at braverangels.org. You can learn more about me. Type in Monica Guzman and I'm there. There's a few
That's
other Monica
impressive.
Guzmans, but I think you'll see you'll see
I was going to
me
say,
pretty clearly.
that's impressive. If you've taken over the SEO for Monica
Oh
Guzman,
no,
that's
no, I
impressive.
haven't. I was gonna say, no, there's a really great professor at Cornell, there's a real estate agent in Texas. There's many of us, but I think you'll be
Yeah,
able to tell which one is me.
that's funny. There's a Christian singer from El Salvador named Angel Eduardo,
There you go.
and there's a photographer in Brooklyn named Eduardo Angel. It's bizarre.
It
So
is.
if you're interested in finding me, I'm at angeleduardo.com. I work for wonderful organizations, FIRE, so thefire.org. We're a free speech advocacy organization. Without free speech, we can't do any of this stuff that we're talking about. So please follow them. And also fairforall.org. That's where you could find us. We're all about cultural depolarization and bridge building as well. And Monica, as we start wrapping up here, I want to ask you the question that I think is the most important. What gives you hope, even right now? So I'm asking what gives you hope and not do you have it? Because I know you already do.
Yeah.
So what is it that's giving you hope? What's fueling that right now?
It's giving me hope right now. I am seeing people wrestle. So the anger and some of the kind of stunnedness after the election, the amount of pain and the fear, I'm seeing people wrestle with things that they could just put away. They could just believe one thing and put it away. But I'm seeing people wrestle with stuff out there. And that's what we need. We need to keep wrestling, internally and externally, hopefully not violently. But we do need that wrestling. And so your question just made me realize that is exactly where I'm finding hope. My friends who are in some of the extremes, are texting me about questioning some of the things they were saying yesterday. And boy, okay. You just see it. You see the swirl and the dance. And
Yeah.
I just know that that's going to lead us somewhere better. Just keep dancing, keep wrestling.
Yeah. I fully agree. Yeah. I can't help but be hopeful because look, we're all here. This event is happening. You and I are talking and people are listening to this.
Yeah.
Right? That interest, that desire for this, that's enough.
That's awesome.
That's plenty, and if I can, I'll just,
Yay.
I've got my guy here.
Yeah.
That symbol, I'll quote the movie now. The symbol of the House of L means hope. And embodied within that hope is the fundamental belief in the potential for every person to be a force for good. So that's what gives me hope.
Awesome.
Monica, thank you so much for talking to me. I love talking to you. I'm so glad that we get to do this and twice in one day.
I know. I'm so lucky. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Angel. Thanks to everyone who stuck around. I'm
Likewise.
sure you heard things that were really challenging. I can't predict, but I just thank you. I just thank you and keep dancing.
Yeah. Keep dancing, indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Village Square. Thank you, everyone who helped put this together. And thank you all for having us. Go out there, be okay, be good, do good, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you out there. All right. Good night.